There are moments in life that fundamentally reshape who we are. Moments that strip away everything we thought we knew about love, family, and trust. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday afternoon in October when my daughter looked me in the eyes and told me she wished I had never been born. I had raised her alone since she was 3 years old. Her father walked out when she was still in diapers, leaving behind nothing but a stack of unpaid bills and a heart full of broken promises. I worked double shifts as a nurse for years, sometimes going days without sleep just to keep a roof over our heads. I packed her lunches, helped with homework, sat through endless school plays and parent-teacher conferences. I gave her everything I had, and in return she gave me the one thing I never expected: betrayal. But as the old saying goes, what goes around comes around. Karma has a way of finding us all, even when we least expect it. And when it finally knocked on my daughter's door, it came with a force that would change everything. From the moment she was born, I knew my daughter was special. Her eyes held a certain wisdom, a depth that seemed far beyond her years. I named her Hope because that's exactly what she represented to me: hope for a better future, hope for a life different from the one I had known. Her father, James, was a charming man with a magnetic smile and a talent for telling people exactly what they wanted to hear. I fell for it, as so many do. We married young, barely out of our teens, and within a year I was pregnant. I thought the baby would bring us closer. Instead, it drove us apart. James wasn't ready to be a father. He liked his freedom, his late nights with friends, his weekends spent doing whatever he pleased. A crying infant didn't fit into that picture. By the time Hope was 2, he was already staying out until dawn, coming home with excuses that grew thinner by the day. By the time she turned 3, he was gone for good. I remember the morning he left. He kissed Hope on the forehead, told me he needed to find himself, and walked out the door. I never saw him again. Not a phone call, not a birthday card, not a single child support payment. He vanished like smoke, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life we had built together, and pick them up I did. I had no choice. There was a tiny girl who depended on me, a girl who didn't understand why her daddy wasn't coming home. I held her in my arms and promised her that I would never leave her, that I would always be there, no matter what. It was a promise I intended to keep. The early years were brutal. I worked the night shift at the hospital so I could be home during the day to take Hope to school. I slept in 3-hour increments, grabbing naps whenever I could. There were weeks when I survived on coffee and sheer determination. But every time I looked at Hope's face, every time she smiled at me or wrapped her tiny arms around my neck, it all felt worth it. She was my reason for everything. I watched her grow from a curious toddler into a bright, spirited young girl. She had her father's smile, but thankfully none of his selfishness. She was kind, empathetic, and fiercely protective of me, even at a young age. I remember one time when I came home from a particularly brutal shift, exhausted and on the verge of tears. Hope, who was maybe 7 at the time, made me a cup of tea. She burned her little fingers on the kettle, but she didn't complain. She just brought me that tea, sat beside me, and told me everything would be okay. In those moments, I felt like the luckiest mother in the world. I had lost so much, but I had gained something priceless. Hope was my everything, my reason for getting up every morning, my anchor in a world that often felt like it was spinning out of control. I poured every ounce of love I had into her. I sacrificed my social life, my career ambitions, my dreams of traveling and experiencing the world. None of that mattered. What mattered was her. It was always her. And then somewhere along the way, something shifted. It happened so gradually that I barely noticed it at first. The hugs became shorter. The conversations became briefer. The bright, open expression on her face was replaced by something guarded, something I didn't recognize. I told myself it was just adolescence, just the natural process of a child becoming independent. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The teenage years were a battleground. Suddenly, the daughter who had once made me tea and told me everything would be okay was slamming doors and rolling her eyes at everything I said. She accused me of not understanding her, of being controlling, of ruining her life. I tried to be patient. I remembered what it was like to be young, to feel misunderstood, to crave freedom. But her anger felt different. It felt personal. It felt like she was punishing me for something I had done, Even though I couldn't figure out what that something was, I started noticing changes in her behavior. She was spending more time with a group of friends I didn't recognize, staying out later than I was comfortable with, and coming home with a dismissive attitude that cut deeper than any insult. She stopped telling me about her day, stopped asking about mine. We became strangers living under the same roof. I tried everything to reach her. I tried talking, listening, giving her space, and even asking for help from school counselors. Nothing worked. She seemed determined to push me away, to build walls between us that I couldn't tear down. And the worst part was, I didn't understand why. I had given her everything. I had sacrificed everything. And she was throwing it all back in my face as if it meant nothing. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October. Hope had come home late the night before, hours past her curfew, smelling of cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. I had waited up, packing the floor, calling her phone repeatedly until it went straight to voicemail. When she finally walked through the door at 2 in the morning, I was angry, scared, and exhausted. I demanded to know where she had been. She looked at me with such coldness, such contempt, that I almost didn't recognize her. And then she said the words that would haunt me for years to come. She told me that I was a pathetic, lonely woman who had nothing in her life except her job. She told me I was suffocating her, that I had ruined her childhood with my constant worrying and hovering. She told me that she wished she had gone to live with her father, that maybe he would have actually let her live her life. And then, with a voice as cold as ice, she said, "I wish you had never been born." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and poisonous. I felt something inside me shatter, something that I didn't even know could break. It was as if all the years of sacrifice, all the sleepless nights, all the double shifts and skipped meals, had been erased in a single sentence. My daughter, the girl I had given my entire life to, wished I had never existed. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The words were lodged in my throat, choking me. I just stood there, staring at her, feeling the tears well up in my eyes. And then, without another word, she turned and walked to her room, slamming the door behind her. I heard the lock click into place, a sound that felt like the final closing of a door between us that I would never be able to reopen. I spent the rest of that night sitting on the couch, staring at the wall, replaying her words over and over in my mind. I thought about all the things I could have done differently, all the mistakes I must have made. I blamed myself, as mothers always do. But underneath that guilt, there was something else. Something that felt a lot like betrayal. I had given her everything I had, and in return she had given me nothing but contempt. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. And no matter how much I tried to understand, I couldn't. The days that followed were unbearable. Hope barely spoke to me. She came and went as she pleased, treating our home like a hotel where meals were served and laundry was done, but where she had no obligation to be kind or respectful. I went through the motions of my daily life, going to work, coming home, cooking dinner, but I felt hollow. The joy that had once defined my existence was gone, replaced by a deep, gnawing sadness that I couldn't shake. I confided in my sister, Linda, who listened with a sympathetic ear. She told me to give Hope time, that teenagers are cruel and that eventually she would come around. But Linda didn't understand. She had 2 sons who were polite, well-behaved, and still called her every day. She had never felt the sting of being rejected by her own child. She couldn't possibly understand the depth of my pain. I started going to therapy, hoping that talking to a professional would help me process my feelings. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Patterson, told me that I had done nothing wrong, that I had been a good mother, and that Hope's behavior was a reflection of her own struggles, not my failures. On some level, I knew she was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are 2 very different things. Months passed. Hope turned 18 and graduated from high school with mediocre grades. She had been accepted to a college a few hours away, and I helped her pack her things. There was no tearful goodbye, no heartfelt hug. She loaded her bags into a friend's car, gave me a curt wave, and drove away without looking back. I stood on the porch and watched her go, feeling the last piece of my heart crumble. She called me occasionally during her first semester, but the conversations were brief and transactional. She needed money. She needed me to send her things. She needed to tell me she wouldn't be coming home for the holidays. There was never a "how are you" or "I miss you." It was always about what she needed from me, and I gave it because I was still her mother, and despite everything, I still loved her. I still hoped that one day she would come back to me, but she didn't. She drifted further and further away, building a life that had no room for me. She changed her phone number without telling me. She moved apartments, and I only found out weeks later when a package I sent came back marked "Return to Sender." I tried to find her on social media, but she had blocked me. I had been erased from her life as if I had never existed. For a while, I fell into a deep depression. I stopped going to work, stopped eating, stopped caring about anything. My sister Linda had to practically drag me out of bed and force me to seek help. I went back to therapy, started taking antidepressants, and slowly, painfully, began to rebuild my life. I threw myself back into my work, taking on extra shifts and volunteering for the most challenging cases. I found a strange comfort in helping others, in being needed by patients who couldn't take care of themselves. It was a small way of reminding myself that I still had worth, that I still mattered, even if my own daughter didn't think so. I also started reconnecting with friends I had neglected over the years. I joined a book club, started going to yoga classes, and even took a painting class, something I had always wanted to do. Life began to feel less bleak. There was still a hole in my heart, a hollow space where my daughter used to be, but I was learning to live around it. Years went by. I celebrated my 50th birthday without a call from Hope. I survived a bout of pneumonia without her even knowing I was sick. Life continued as it always does, with or without us. Then came the phone call that would change everything. It was late on a Friday night when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer it, assuming it was a telemarketer, but something made me pick it up. It was a number I didn't recognize, but there was a familiar area code. My heart started pounding in my chest. "Hello," I said, my voice trembling. It was Hope. She was crying, sobbing so hard that I could barely make out her words. She told me she had made a terrible mistake. She told me she was sorry for everything she had said and done. She told me she needed me. I listened, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to hang up, to protect myself from more pain. But another part, the part that would always be her mother, couldn't turn away. I asked her what had happened. She told me she had fallen in love with a man named Derek. He was charming, handsome, and he had promised her the world. She had moved in with him, given up her job, and cut ties with all her friends. He had isolated her, controlled her, and slowly, methodically, stolen her independence. And then, when she had nothing left, he had left her for another woman. But that wasn't the worst of it. She was pregnant, and Derek wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. She had no money, no job, and nowhere to go. She was sleeping on a friend's couch, trying to figure out how to put her life back together. And in that moment of desperation, she had thought of me. I didn't know what to say. I was filled with a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, pity, and beneath it all, a deep, aching love that had never truly gone away. This was my daughter, my Hope. She was broken and scared, and she needed me. But I was also angry. Angry that it had taken her hitting rock bottom to reach out. Angry that she had treated me so horribly for so many years. Angry that she had taken me for granted and only remembered I existed when she had no one else to turn to. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I would help her. Not because she deserved it, but because I was her mother. And being a mother meant showing up, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. I drove to her friend's apartment and found Hope sitting on the front steps, shivering in the cold. She was thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes and a sadness that seemed to radiate from her very being. She looked up at me with those same eyes I had fallen in love with all those years ago, and I felt my resolve crumble. I took her home. I made her a cup of tea, just like she had done for me all those years ago, and we sat in silence, trying to figure out how to bridge the chasm that had grown between us. The days that followed were difficult. There was so much unspoken pain, so many wounds that had never healed. Hope was grateful for my help, but she was also guarded. She didn't trust easily, and I understood why. She had been burned by the people she had trusted most. I helped her find a job, get back on her feet, and prepare for the arrival of her baby. I went with her to doctor's appointments and held her hand when she was scared. I bought baby clothes and set up a nursery in my spare room. Little by little, we began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, tears, and moments when I wanted to give up. But I didn't. I had spent too many years without my daughter to let her go again. And slowly, painfully, we began to heal. Then came the day of Hope's delivery. I was in the delivery room when my granddaughter was born. I was the one who cut the umbilical cord. I was the one who held Hope's hand as she cried tears of joy and exhaustion. I was the one who saw the fear and hope in her eyes as she looked at her newborn daughter. And in that moment, something shifted. As Hope looked at her baby girl, I saw a reflection of myself from decades ago. I saw the same love, the same fear, the same determination to be a good mother. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. But the real surprise, the moment that truly proved karma had come full circle, came a few months later. I had gone over to Hope's apartment to help with the baby. We were sitting on the couch, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, when the doorbell rang. Hope went to answer it, and I heard a gasp. When she came back into the room, her face was pale. "What happened?" I asked. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It was Derek," she said. "He came to see me. He heard I had the baby and he wanted to see her, but he didn't get a chance." "Do you mean?" Hope took a deep breath. "There was another woman with him. She ran out of the building crying. I guess she figured out he had another woman on the side. He came here to show off his new family, and instead he lost his old one. The woman he left me for, she left him. She found out he was seeing someone else and she couldn't handle it, so she packed her things and left while he was here." I sat there, stunned. The man who had broken my daughter's heart had finally gotten a taste of his own medicine. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, had delivered justice in the most poetic way possible. Derek had tried to flaunt his new life, and instead he had lost everything. Hope burst into tears, but they were tears of relief, not sadness. "I know it sounds horrible," she said, "but I'm glad it happened. He treated me so badly. He took advantage of me, manipulated me, and left me with nothing. Now he knows how it feels. Now he's the one who's alone." I hugged her tightly. "You have nothing to feel bad about," I said. "He made his choices, and now he's facing the consequences." "That's not your fault. That's karma," she nodded, wiping her tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for everything I said to you. I didn't mean it. I was so angry and confused, and I took it out on the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. I was so stupid." I kissed her forehead. "You were young and hurting. I forgave you a long time ago." And I meant it. Holding her and my granddaughter, I realized that forgive go of the past. It was about embracing the future. It was about recognizing that we all make mistakes, but we can learn from them and become better people. Hope had learned from hers, and so had I today. My relationship with Hope is stronger than ever. She's a wonderful mother to my granddaughter, and she's finally found peace. She married a kind, loving man who treats her and the baby like royalty. Her company is growing, and she's happier than I've ever seen her. As for me, I've finally made peace with my past. I've realized that the years of struggle and sacrifice were not in vain. They made me who I am. They made me resilient, compassionate, and strong. They taught me that family isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for. And as for the cruel words Hope once said to me, I can finally look back on them without feeling the sting of betrayal. They were a moment of weakness, a reflection of her own pain and confusion. They were not a reflection of me as a mother or as a person. The lesson I've learned from this experience is that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. It's not about excusing someone's behavior or pretending the past didn't happen. It's about freeing ourselves from the burden of anger and resentment and allowing ourselves to move forward. I also learned that karma is real. It might not always work the way we expect, and it might not always come when we want it to. But it does come. It finds its way to those who have done wrong, and it brings with it the consequences of their actions. Derek experienced that firsthand, and in a way, so did Hope. The universe humbled her, and she emerged from that experience a better person. But perhaps the most important lesson is that love is the most powerful force in the universe. It's what brought us together, what sustained us through the darkest days, and what ultimately healed us. It's what made me drive to that friend's apartment and bring my daughter home. It's what made Hope pie.